notice, but we really appreciate it.
No, everything has to be done quite briskly at the moment. We're all
Mm,
still reeling and responding. It's been 4 weeks of responding quickly to things, so it's cool.
okay, well, yeah, and it's going to be another few weeks/months, so
Yeah, exactly. How
oh,
are you,
we're
Joe,
live as
anyway?
well, I think so. But yeah, everyone's probably hearing our chat. But I'm very well. I'm very well. Yeah, I was just thinking. I mean, I know we're live, Gina, but I just thought I'd let you know that we're also live.
Okay.
But yes,
Okay, so
very
no
well.
okay, no dark secrets will be
Unless you're happy
unleashed.
at the minute with 39 other people knowing them. I mean, entertaining secrets, if we're going to get any, would be the vibe. So you're getting love hearts, laughs. People want secrets, Gina.
Oh no, I could have prepared a different kind of talk. This is frustrating. It could have been more cabaret or something. I
Yeah,
know.
yeah, we can look. There'll be a Q&A later. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, yeah, bring it on at the end. People can ask what they want.
Yeah, this can be a podcast. We'll do a segment at the end, which is tea with Gina and Joe.
Okay. I don't have any tea. I only have gin in the corner of the room, but I think that will do,
It's a
won't it?
Friday and it's
Yeah.
after midday, so and
Yes.
it's sunny, and we know what that means in Britain. Day drinking. That's what it means.
Yes. True.
Um, shall we maybe begin? Does that sound good? Yeah. So we've got just about 50 people with us now. I'm not sure how many registered. Mary, is it worth hanging on, or do you think?
Uh, there's another few people registered, but I think we should start for sure. It's a few minutes past.
Okay. Is there and everyone who's attending will have got the Supreme Court stuff, won't they? So everyone should have that. Great. Okay. Let me just bring up my notes. So first of all, everyone, I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. As Gina and I were saying, as you were joining, obviously a lot of this has been arranged at really short notice. We're very much responding to events as they happen. In terms of today, I just wanted to talk you through the way in which this session will run. So I'm going to say a few things and just sort of remind you of our union's commitments to trans and non-binary rights. Hello, I'm Jo Grady. I'm the General Secretary. We also have with us Mary Meekings, who is UCU's Head of Policy and Equality. Mary will just be going through the context that I assume many of you are aware of, but I think it's really important for us to just have that front and center. And then, Gina, I have just become aware that I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce your surname. I'm really sorry. Do you want to let me know?
Yeah, sure. Gwen Frewi.
Gwen Fueri, what a lovely name. As a
It's
dyslexic
Welsh.
person, there was just a lot of letters there, and I was thinking, I don't stand a chance.
It's
Gina
it's a
Gwen
Welsh
Fueri.
thing.
Lovely.
Yeah. Okay.
Gina is an amazing UCU member and rep up in Edinburgh, has just won an award for their equality work. And Gina's going to be giving us a branch perspective on what this has in terms of implications on the ground. Then we'll finish back with me talking about what members can do. And then practical next steps from Mary regarding the EHRC consultation. But really, we want to make sure that we've got time before we wrap up for some feedback from you and some Q&A, depending on what you might submit and how you might respond to what you are told. So this session is being recorded. There was an announcement at the beginning when the recording started. Mainly so that people can look back later. If when it comes to the Q&A, if there's a reason to bring anybody else in, if you don't want to be recorded, you can just say. I also want to just give a shout out to UCU's LGBT plus research conference who are joining us in their lunch break, such as the dedication. Thank you very, very much. So let's get cracking. In terms of where we are, you will know if you've looked at the guidance, that UCU's position on the Supreme Court ruling, and our message to universities is do nothing. Do absolutely nothing until, you know, we potentially are in a position where you may have to do something. We need to do all we can in this moment to support our trans and non-binary staff, and we've made that clear to universities as well. And for what it is worth, we've had a meeting with UCEA and UUK, and I think it's fair to say that their position is similar to ours, that, you know, the EHRC have made an interim position clear, but this is not full guidance, and that we should not be taking action on the basis of this kind of interim position that we find ourselves in. We have made clear in the documentation that we have put out that we need to reaffirm our solidarity and support to trans and non-binary members in this period. And we're looking at our campaigning materials here, refreshing what needs to be refreshed. Something that will be coming out of this meeting, we know that we've just seen the HRC have kind of published their timeline, will be more documentation about what branches should be doing, how we should engage in that consultation. I imagine we'll put together some guidance to help you engage with that consultation. We're working with the National Union of Students as well, who, as you can imagine, share a very similar position to us. And we'll be outlining collective actions that we want you to participate in as a branch as well. Essentially, you know, and it's there in the guidance that we've shared with you already. Our trans and non-binary members, as many other groups of members, have access to protected rights, you know, whether that is freedom from sexual harassment, GDPR protections, and this position right now that we find ourselves in does not trump any of them. And we have a real duty in this moment to engage with the consultation that the HRC is opening and to make sure that we are standing for equality, that we're not paving the way to discrimination, and that we are ensuring that the rights of all workers are respected and adhered to. So that's my opening address. That's where our union is. That's where we stand. And that's what we're going to be doing in the next few months, working together as a union, branch by branch, to influence this consultation, to show trans and non-binary members that our union stands with them, and to make sure that we get a better outcome at the end of this as well. And to, you know, my aim in this period is to bring as many other communities in with us as possible. So not just students, universities and employers, members of the public, anyone and everyone, and other trade unions as well. I know there'll be people in this meeting who've been working across trade unions. We need to see more of that. I was at a TUC executive committee meeting earlier this week, and I was telling the TUC, you have to pick the pace up on this. Like, the urgent is now. There is no waiting for weeks to get groups of people together. Like, we have to be acting very quickly on this. So that's a bit separate to what we're doing as UCU, but I did want you to know that that's something that we are pushing for, kind of above our union and with other unions. So anyway, I'm going to hand over to Mary, and Mary, on you go in terms of understanding the context.
Perfect. Thanks, Jay. Thanks so much. I'm really conscious that I think we've got a really knowledgeable audience here. So in terms of just laying out the context, I'll be very brief, and I think we all want to hear from Gina as well. But yeah, I'll just start. I just want to start by offering that a clear overview of the recent Supreme Court ruling and what it actually means. But I think what more importantly at the moment is what it doesn't mean in terms of what we've been hearing and sort of rhetoric around it. And so the case, and as we all know, has sparked some really understandable concern, and particularly around the interpretation of the word sex in the Equality Law. So the court confirmed that in the context of the Gender Recognition Act and the Equality Act, sex refers to biological sex and not gender identity. But we want to be really clear, and I think I'm just reiterating what Joe said, but I think it's so important that this ruling does not roll back trans rights. That's not what it's doing, and it doesn't remove legal protections from trans people, for trans people under the Equality Act. So, but it does open the door to institutions potentially misinterpreting or misapplying that decision, and especially in policy changes around single-sex spaces or services. So I think that's where we're being super vigilant here. And I think that's also why it's so important that we, organise together, and we also just really hold that line that nothing needs to change at institutional level right now, today. So as Joe said, we're awaiting that comprehensive guidance from the EHRC with trepidation, perhaps, in terms of what, how clear that will be or otherwise. And it's expected later this summer. But, UCU's message to branches and to employers is really simple, and it's to do nothing until that guidance is issued. We don't want to see reactionary, misinterpreted actions taking place that could potentially sort of cause harm. But in the meantime, there is always something we can do, right? So we are supporting our trans and non-binary colleagues and really reinforcing our inclusive values and being alert to any premature moves that could harm staff or students. And I think for me, when we've been, we've really been moving at pace and trying to keep up with everything that's happening, but it's just keeping that firm in our mind that we're really looking for more inclusion, not less. That's what we're doing here. So at UCU, we're monitoring the situation really closely, and as Joe said, talking to other organisations as well, and just really providing that assurance that we are across that, and that we'll be providing more detailed support and policy advice as the full guidance is released. I'm going to talk a little bit about the the practicalities around that consultation, but before that, I'll pass over to Gina.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So my brief here today is a couple of things. It's to talk about and give reflections on how the ruling is being received at branch level. It's about talking about key risks, such as policy changes, member well-being, and also examples of good practice. So I thought the easiest way in terms of a narrative is if I talk about what we've done sequentially since we got the decision on the 16th of April. And that way you'll know what we've been doing here and how Edinburgh University has been responding and how we've worked together. I think that might be quite useful. So for example, yes, 16th of April, Wednesday, I remember getting messages from very concerned friends. So people were really worried about their trans friends, and so they were reaching out. The very next day, the Staff Pride Network of Edinburgh University, we met online. We had basically just a meeting where people were expressing their distress and bewilderment at what was going on. And it was really just a session. It was an online session where we could talk about how we were feeling, and those kind of sessions, we've had some of those, and they're really important. On the 19th, on Saturday, there were protests across Britain, and that was very affirming. And UCU were there, but thousands of people were there in Edinburgh, and that was a very affirming, in a way, a reactive protest, but also something that was very invigorating. Then on Monday, 21st, already all these things happening, we had a trans support group for staff and students, and it was just for trans people. It was in person. And again, that was a really wonderful space where I sat around a table with these trans staff members, and we just talked about everything, how we were feeling, our fears. And that was such a rewarding opportunity as well, just to meet people who I hadn't really known. So those kind of sessions, again, very important. After this, we also reached out to HR, Staff Pride Network and UCU. We reached out to HR. I was updating UCU on Discord, and on the 23rd of April, HR sent out a letter which basically says the kind of things that UCU are saying, which is we need to kind of make sure that there's nothing rushed. That's being done at the moment at Edinburgh University. We're going to wait until the summer, and that's been Edinburgh University's HR position as well, which has been lucky for us in as much as we're in alignment with that. After that, so there were various EDI committees that I attended. There was the Congress where we talked again about STUC Congress, where we talked about these things. There was a trans event online, a Zoom event for trans academics to again talk about their distress, about what was happening and solutions and concerns about what was basically transpiring. On the 1st of May, we had a HR meeting. Staff Pride Network, UCU, with HR, but they basically re-emphasized their new trans policy and very similar things to what you're hearing today from UCU. So we had that meeting, and that was very important to kind of just reassure people. And then on the second, so we'd been organizing an event for some time on trans inclusive and LGBT inclusive education. And that was with a different network called Queer Ed. It's an academic Edinburgh University network. So we have different networks doing different things. And UCU, through me, we collaborated on organizing that event. And it turned into, again, a very positive, affirming space where we shifted from talking about education with our two speakers to people, whether some people were crying, some people were talking about their distress, but also their relief that there were spaces like this being organized. So again, I do emphasize a lot of these spaces were really important, and they still are. Just a few more, but like on 6th of May, sorry, 7th of May, there was the Day of Action, Trade Unions for Trans Rights. So UCU led on an event. I was there with my loudhailer, made a couple of speeches, had some really nice interactions afterwards. That was on Bristow Square. That was a really short but very affirming opportunity to do this kind of reactive protest, but a very important one. And then tomorrow there's another big demo outside the Scottish Parliament. So I look at all those things that have been happening. There's been liaising with HR to make sure we're on the same page, that we're aware of trans people's concerns, and putting over UCU's position. There's been lots of demos, there's been meetings, these very affirming meetings in person and online for trans people to really just air their distress. And there have been some other events, more creative, like the inclusive education event that we were planning anyway, but it really highlights the importance of having a schedule of events that you can be working towards and working with different networks. They give an opportunity for people to come together as well in a very creative way. And that ties into what we do at UCU Edinburgh, which is that it's almost this line from this poem that is we use a lot, and it's the war that matters is the war against imagination. All other wars are subsumed in it. And this is kind of our philosophy. Sometimes protest and activism has to be reactive, but we also have to make sure that trans people are not kind of subsumed in these narratives of delegitimization. We know what they are: groomer, predator, voyeur, etc. We need to have affirming spaces, creative spaces, and we try to make sure we have those as well at Edinburgh University for trans people to feel like they own their own space. And so we organize those kind of spaces as well. So that's what's been happening up at Edinburgh University. And so in terms of responding to these concerns, in terms of reflections, the rulings being received at branch level among trans people with a great deal of distress. I have one colleague who's gone on medical leave. There are people who have been affected in different ways, but it is very distressing. Fortunately, there have been no rushed policy changes. And in terms of well-being, different people deal with things differently, but our thing is to try and create spaces where we can come together and talk about things. And in terms of good practice, I would say a mixture of these reactive protests, for example, these in-person meetings, online meetings, and just opportunities for people to talk, as well as reaching out to HR, for example, making sure that we're all on the same page and trying to make sure we continue to be inclusive. If there's one other last thing I do want to highlight as well, we've heard a lot about the clarity that the Supreme Court ruling has brought, and that's nothing of the kind. I think I want to highlight just the sense of shock and almost contradiction as well of what the Supreme Court ruling represents in relation to all the progress that's been done over the years, over the past 20, 25 years. So I was talking to Mary just yesterday about this, the fact that after the Supreme Court ruling decision, I ordered a new passport. Like many trans people, a lot of fear going on at the moment. And I got my new passport just a few days ago, and it says F for female. And it really highlights this is in alignment with my life and with everything that's been going on for the last decades. And suddenly to have this completely contradictory ruling that says trans women can't use women's toilets, they're not women anymore, it goes against all our other ID, all our daily life interactions. And so that also kind of highlights there isn't clarity. It's made things more confusing and more contradictory. And we need to bear that in mind when we're seeing what's happening now. And yeah, but also to bear in mind, trans people are still going to live their lives and they're still going to be trans. And it's very important to remember that.
Exactly. And I don't know if you can see there's a number of love hearts on the screen for you, Gina. Thank you. And I think, you know, there's a flood of love hearts on the screen for you. And that's exactly where we are coming from as a union with our guidance. And I think the position that we've adopted right now, you know, that these are people's lives, that this is communities that we share, and that we are going to make sure that everyone can continue to exist in them with dignity. So what I'm going to do very briefly, so what I would say to you, if you have any, Mary has been answering questions that have been submitted as you go. If there are any questions that maybe you want to ask me or Gina, write them in as well. I'm going to go through in terms of practicalities in what branches can do and cover again a bit of what we have been doing. At the beginning, I did say that we've spoken to UCEA and UUK. We haven't managed to speak to the Association of Colleges yet. I think for various reasons, higher education employers are just kind of more mapped into these debates, probably because, you know, of things that have happened recently, not least of all the OFS fine. So I just think that they've been a bit more forthcoming with us, but the AOC is on our list of parties to engage. But I wanted to, you know, I think, again, there was a question about trying to be on the front foot. And even though if institutions are adopting a do nothing approach, is there anything else that they may be pausing or that we can push forward in this moment? So depending on what structures you've already got in place, you should use them where appropriate or develop new ones to actively seek dialogue with the senior leadership that you have or the equality team. If you haven't already done that, I would say do it now. Make it the task that you do before people clock off today, to get commitments to unnecessary change happening now, to push for transparent reviews. But as you know, as we say in our guidance, and Gina has just said, you know, stress the importance of what is this going to do to your university or college community in this meantime. You need to be making statements to make sure that these groups of people and these individuals understand that you are upholding their rights. You know, trans people are legally protected from discrimination, from harassment, from victimization in employment and in education. None of this is changed because of that Supreme Court ruling. And that is really important to arm yourself with when you go into an email exchange or any meeting with any employer. We do also think that it is incredibly important that you include trans voices, non-binary voices, intersex colleagues in this engagement process. Universities and colleges should be doing that too. And I would argue to your employer that university union branches like ours and college branches are really well placed to facilitate this. So the first principle is they need to be promoting practical and inclusive preparation. So ensuring formal mechanisms are in place to allow trans and non-binary people to be involved in the decision making that will impact them. So making sure that your employer, your HR team, whatever they're called in your institution, are actively seeking out the views of people impacted, the people that are going to be impacted, you know. So you know, sometimes I think there is kind of overemphasis placed on other groups. We need to be speaking to the group that's most impacted. Identify spaces and services that may be impacted. You know, we, as I say, recommend and would demand no changes are made at this stage. Equality impact assessments. We want to be encouraging that these are refreshed, and that any proposed changes, particularly in terms of discrimination and dignity, are addressed. Ensure clear and inclusive signage. As we've said, you know, proposing that additional facilities for maximum inclusion and that these things are done with care, to use respect and unambiguous language to support people, and definitely no changes without proper consultation with us. We are also, you know, suggesting that we should be seeing proper education and advocacy. So equip managers and frontline staff with knowledge to understand what their legal duties are. I think, you know, sometimes in these spaces where things seem to be happening quite a lot and quickly, people hear something and think that that means that's what's the law now. It isn't. And, you know, in terms of our commitments to you, one of the things that will be good to hear from today is what more you think we could be doing to make sure that you feel properly resourced, that you feel properly trained in terms of what you need and how you need to respond. Gina talked a little bit just then as well about the importance of organising local events, you know, actually educating your own membership about what this means. And I think that this has been, for me, the role that I think the union movement has to play. There may be a kind of a broad church of people's personal beliefs around various issues relating to this, but we cannot, as trade unionists, agree that it is okay to pave the way for legitimate discrimination against trans and non-binary people. We cannot. And there is, you know, in terms of people being complacent, there is no way that it would stop here. You know, I hope that we're not looking at a reform coalition government with the Tories or Labour in the future. This is not going to end here, like, and not on our watch. And I think that's super important for you to be talking to your colleagues about how we have to be really clear that we will not see the paving of the way to discrimination. So having events where you demonstrate solidarity is important, but having events where you actually convey the importance of what this means. You know, trans people have been warning about this for quite some time, and it has happened. Complacency ends now. But also briefings, you know, visible solidarity actions are important. But as I say, getting people on board and getting people on board with the campaign is really important. I would argue, if you can, as branches, think about ways that you might raise money that you could donate to the Good Law Project. I'm not normally one for saying that we should put our faith in the legal process because the law isn't always fair, and it can take a really long time, but they are taking forward a case which I think is of significant importance, not just in terms of what the longer term ruling of it might be, but I think important in terms of putting pressure on our institutions right now to behave in a compliant way with the law. So I would encourage branches to do things to donate to those places too. Gina, I don't know if you want to add anything to what I've said. I kind of riffed off you a little bit, but it might have given you food for thought.
Everything you just said, like with Good Law Project, I mean, I'm doom scrolling Blue Sky every day, and Good Law Project have really emerged as one of the really powerful pro-trans forces in response to the Supreme Court, just because of their knowledge. And also they work with people like Jess O'Thompson, who is this very good trans legal specialist. So I definitely do echo what you've said about the Good Law Project. Yeah, there's so much misinformation, information, and catastrophizing as well. So do take breaks from social media as well. At the same time, don't go crazy like in the way I am going slightly at the moment. So because but I have been looking at the Good Law Project advice. I mean, it is still quite grim. I'm not going to sugarcoat what they're saying. And in fact, we've been talking about how would we get around things like bathroom bans and so forth, and how can we be creative in terms of our understanding of resources. And I mean, we will need to be creative. We will need to pull resources because I don't want to say that it's necessarily going to be great, the road ahead. So yeah, that's a kind of doomy kind of note to kind of add to this, but yeah,
Well,
just yeah, I don't know.
We're dealing with actually an incredibly oppressive, you know, context, aren't we? So doom is ever there. What I would say is, I think what is going to get everyone through this period is taking everything one step at a time, right? And right now, and I know Mary's going to say something about it in next steps, we have, you know, the consultation window opening. And I think we have a moment here. And, you know, I gestured towards it at the beginning when I said I was at a meeting of the executive members of the TUC earlier this week. The TUC cannot sit this one out. The trade union movement cannot sit this one out. Everyone is going to have to get incredibly involved with talking about, if this is allowed to happen, what this means. You know, this is not just a victory for people who have a particular view about what biology means. This is incredibly serious rewriting of equality law with regards employment to discriminate against people. The trade union movement cannot sit this out. It is incredibly urgent, is incredibly important. And I don't generally get involved on debates in the media about trans and non-binary issues, because we know what they are. We know that they're set up to be really dehumanizing debates and what have you. But I'm going to have to start having them, because, you know, everybody's being encouraged to have a view about this. But where are we talking about, you know, where is the media talking about how you can't walk down a street without there being 5 or more homeless people, and the damage that that is doing to society and what that means about us as a society? But the media don't want to talk about that, because actually that's not, you know, a kind of a right-wing narrative. So there's huge issues in this country that need fixing, you know, that are real kind of like moral stains about where we are. And this is what's been chosen to focus on. So, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent a bit, but what I guess I'm saying is I have deliberately not got involved in these debates because I don't think they're helpful. But actually, there is a moment now where sensible, rational people are going to have to go on debates and actually say, this is ridiculous. Like, why are we even talking about this? You know, and particularly in terms of women's safety. You know, women's safety is that rape has been decriminalised in the UK. Women's safety is that there's no money for refuge centres. You know, women's safety is a myriad of things, which is nothing to do with this. And sorry to sort of be using segregating language on women there, but I didn't mean to do that either. Anyway, in terms of next steps, Mary, I know you want to say a number of things so that people who are watching that are UC members know what's coming next. But also, you know, if you think there is something that we can and should be doing that we maybe haven't covered, now is a really good time to raise it in the Q&A. And yeah, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Just to close this really before we move on to that Q&A, and there's loads of questions come in and I've been like rushing replying to them. So my email address is there. We can kind of take some of the more detailed ones offline. And if I've already answered one, but you kind of want to bring that in, then please put your hand up and we can do that in the Q&A as well. But yeah, just before that, in terms of what branches do now, I think we've made it quite clear. We think, you know, union branches and UCU branches have a really important role in shaping what this is all going to look like, and certainly in terms of like supporting all of their members as well through the next few weeks and months. And so we all know the HRC is releasing full guidance later this summer, but they are running a consultation. I know some of us can sometimes feel a bit like consultations are performative, but I do think that there's an opportunity for us here to really kind of put UCU's case across. So we will be fully engaging with that. Again, I'm sure lots of you have like been reading everything in the news in the last few days, but I think it was quite positive that they have at least extended it till the end of June. So we were looking at like a 2-week window, and now we've got a 6-week window. So that gives us a little bit more breathing space. And of course, we'll be doing one nationally for UCU and putting in something on behalf of all of our members. But I've been talking to you know, colleagues at other unions, and I think we all agree that it would be really strong if our branches engage in this process as well. So it's not, you know, so we have multiple voices heard. So we'll be really encouraging branches to do that as well and be participating. I've had some useful ideas in the Q&A already in terms of how we might do that and how we might support from here. So whether that's sort of templates or just advice about, you know, how much to put in a consultation, what that looks like, and what the shape of it is from sort of people who engage with these types of consultations all the time. So we'll be able to kind of give you some sort of tips as well. But as I say, it's really your voices that I think are really important that are heard. So and those of course of your members in your branches. So I think it will be really good to have that kind of rich diversity of contributions to that. So you'll be hearing more from us on this. I know we have been putting out a few messages on this, but in terms of the consultation itself, we'll be in touch with more details of how to feed in. And yeah, just bear with us. Obviously, it's been very quick moving and we've been doing our best to get this stuff right. So yeah, I think, as I say, we're here and we're here to support as well. So if you do feel that there's things going on the ground that you're not sure about and that you kind of want to run past us, then please do get in touch. So I say, like, we've really we'll make sure that we're sharing our details, and it's just reiterating those messages really. So we're holding our employers to a standard of care, and that includes not jumping the gun. And yeah, as a reminder, I think there's just no requirement to be making detailed policy changes right now. So that's the line that we're holding in the conversations with leadership teams and HR departments, etc. And yeah, as I say, we're here as well. So if you are coming up across problems, we can share those, across the sector, and share learning, the things that we're here to do. And yeah, we'll be here to support every step of the way, really. So yeah, thank you. I think that's all from me. I think we'll go to the Q&A, Jo.
Thanks. Just to cover some of the Q&As that have been answered, there's been questions about kind of practical actions and what have you. There are going to be some practical actions coming out of this meeting essentially and in the next few weeks, which is we want branches to be working around consultations, and I think not just submitting the consultation, but having those kind of public meetings with members, with students and what have you, doing things that they can generate donations. Someone has mentioned in one of the questions, and I did reference this earlier, is a kind of a cross-union group that's been established, Trade Unionists for Trans Rights. I know that Mark Pendleton and B. Hughes have been involved in that. They've kind of reached out to me. We're going to be doing a kind of a photo opportunity at our Congress next week if you're around. So seek out me or seek out Mark or B if you know what they look like, or Mary. Mary will be there as well. Gina, I don't know if you are. Find one of us and we'll have details about that. But in terms of open questions, I don't know if you can see them, Gina, but I'm just going to read some out. One I think was a joke, which was from Grant, which is when does the cabaret start? We've got one which is I got my new passport about the same time as a non-binary person, though. Sorry, are you reading this as I'm reading it? Yeah. The gender flag for me doesn't reflect my gender. Non-binary people in the UK are raised at a political and legal level. Yep. No shade, then to go no shade, by the way, but yeah, I think it's a really important point to be reminded of. There's another one here. Our organisation is staunchly against making political statements. Political statement itself, that isn't it? Have you got any advice on explaining to them that this is a legal issue, not necessarily a political one? I'm struggling to make this distinction with the powers that be. I mean, I have something I could say here, but Gina, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything to that one.
In terms of it being more legal than political, I mean, I think it is very political. I think it was fostered in the US. The anti-trans movement was really fostered, certainly financially, from the USA, like at least 15 years ago, from political right-wing ideological stakeholders. So this is something that is increasingly, in some ways it emerged from the right, the political right in the USA, although of course, yes, in some parts of the left in Britain as well have embraced this trans exclusionary politics. But for me, it feels very political. It's become almost like a political article of faith in this new kind of reform politics, the Farage politics of the UK, which is what makes it so terrifying. It's almost like a new political zeitgeist of cruelty and of picking on minorities and policing them as an expression of political power. So for me, it is very political. The legal stuff almost is the how do you enforce this political regime. So for me, the legal part is just the tools that are serving something far more insidious, which is the oppression of the most disempowered groups in Britain.
Yeah, I mean, I would obviously agree with that. I think in terms of, because there's one or two questions that are a bit aligned to the one that Gina just answered, like this is political and there's sort of no way of getting away from that. I think one of the comments that we made when we met employers recently is like, a bit like I just said to all of you, you cannot sit this out. You really have to start making some important statements right now about what institution and what kind of campuses you run. And, even you know, and there's other questions here about what are we going to do if, you know, the traffic continues in this direction and we end up with the worst kind of laws. Well, we seek ways to work around that. You know, it might be that you make all of your spaces gender neutral on campus. It might be something, you know, the solution to that in your space might be something else. And we work around and we make ways that employers, even though they might be being mandated to discriminate, are able not to do so. You know, we have to, I think, right now, try and develop as many spaces of communication and negotiation with employers as possible, because it is true that people who want to see this become law, if it did become law, will be really I'm picking my words carefully, will be really empowered to try and dictate exactly how that should be operationalized in any institution. So it is going to take people being confident and working in collectives to say, well, actually, this is how we're choosing to do something in our institution, and this is what we're doing. So, you know, employers, I think, especially following the OFS ruling, are going to be really nervous about making political statements on this. What they're going to want to do is probably try and negotiate, you know, privately with you and have statements that are then public or have policies that are then public statements. And I think my advice to you would be, if we are getting what we need as branches by them doing that, that is a helpful thing as well, you know, if they're not going to make public statements. One person I did want to bring in, and I know that they're here, is Mark Pendleton. Mary, I don't know if you can bring Mark in. Oh, Mark is here. So Mark, well, Mark has a few things that I imagine Mark would like to say. I know that Mark has already visited at least one branch to speak on this issue. So Mark, are you able to unmute and kind of maybe introduce yourself, let delegates that are here know what you're able to do and what have you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for letting me pop in and say hello. I won't take up a lot of time. I want to make sure we got time for more questions, but just so you can see my face, I'm the LGBT plus rep for higher education on the National Executive Committee, and have been on the LGBT plus members committee for a few years now. And I just wanted to, I guess, show my face. People could recognize me if you're at Congress next week, and to just reiterate what others have said about the ongoing, really long-standing commitment this union has to trans and non-binary inclusion, and that is not going to change. And we are committed to carrying that forward, you know, in all of our workplaces. As Joe said, I've been along to a couple of branch meetings in recent weeks, and myself, other reps on the national committee, are very happy to do that as well. So if you are wanting a bit more information about what's happening on a national level, or some input for your local members about what they can do, please do extend an invitation. Very happy to come along, or to, you know, see if one of the other committee's members can do that. And also, if people do want to join that Trade Unionists for Trans Rights group, I've popped my email in the question section. Hopefully people can see that. It's just markpendletonucu@gmail.com, or you can email Mary if you can't find my email, and she can forward it on to me. Very happy to add to that. We've got about 100 UCU members talking regularly about what we can do to support each other across branches. So it's a really good opportunity to share knowledge and collaborate.
Super, thanks, Mark. And we can send that to people who've registered. Feel free to stick around, because I'm going to just shoot a few questions out. This is more just a point, but it's one to be aware of. We've been told there is pressure from the OFS to update policies in the interim period. They've been checking university websites. Not surprised to hear that. Someone else has put, this is a long one, so I'm going to paraphrase it as I go, that our university's created an interim sort of policy that they've published on their staff hub without any consultation. They've included a section on freedom of speech, relates to the Sussex ruling. Guidance around toilets has become ambiguous and changed from trans people are entitled to access any facilities in accordance with self-identified gender on the basis of appropriate and mutually respected use by all users. And then they put in May further, with access limited according to biological sex. And they've said that essentially our VC has approved this, saying he has the right to, as it's a legal issue. I mean, Mary or Gina, I mean, that just to me seems like something that is not true and needs to. I mean, one of the things I would say for branches is, where you are getting things like this happen, please flag them to us nationally immediately. Mary's probably or Mary or Seth, I'm not sure who would be best at. Mary will say anyway. Cascade them to us immediately, because we would like to be involved in not just knowing so that we can contact the relevant employer group, but we can also then support you in robustly pushing back against this. Gina, did you want to say something? You look poised.
Just this is the kind of situation that the Good Law Project made a Q&A or an FAQs about, and that you can't just focus on the dignity, for example, of the two biological sexes. If the protected characteristic of gender reassignment, if trans people are being excluded, then that is discrimination. So just kind of creating two spaces or saying it's either going to be this or this is discriminatory potentially against trans people. And we, like Joe has already said, we really need to push this angle of gender reassignment as a protected characteristic. Are trans people getting the same access to facilities as non-trans people? And if they're not, that's discrimination. And simply that could be a reason in itself not to just create a men's and women's toilets, which is based on biological sex, if it's discriminatory against trans people. So again, do go into that kind of FAQs, for example, of Good Law Project, but they themselves have said that that's potentially discriminatory action that the university is doing there.
Yeah. There's another question essentially around sorry, I've lost it now. I was scrolling. Oh, there's a few points, a few questions that I think point to could UCU kind of do almost like their own draft talking points or draft FAQs, you know, in terms of if you are presented with this, what is the best way to respond to that? So I think we could definitely start working on that and probably do it in combination with the LGBT committee and input from people like Gina and maybe your group, Mark, to kind of get a sense of what are people being confronted with on the ground and what would it be helpful for you to kind of have the facts, because Caroline Digby-Bowles points out that other groups are kind of very on the front foot with that. So I think we can definitely do that. Someone puts, at my university, there is a real risk avoidance attitude. Their response so far has been, we do nothing until we have to, but obviously we will comply with the law and seek to balance the needs of all protected characteristics. Is there any guidance for presenting an argument to the university from a risk perspective that they would likely respond better from this aspect? As in both Mark and Gina are nodding. I don't know if you want to go.
Mark, I don't know. You can certainly go after me. But just to kind of build on what I've already said in terms of risk avoidance and against discrimination, because discrimination against trans people, it's not just about the Equality Act. Trans people are now, trans women are no longer women according to the Equality Act, right? But they're still trans women according to other types of laws. So universities and buildings, public buildings, it's not just the Equality Act that gives them guidelines. There was one example in the policy from the Good Law Project. It was a different law which said that some public buildings will have to follow. So basically, don't treat this Supreme Court ruling as a kind of one-size-fits-all ruling for trans people. It does apply to the Equality Act only, and there are possibilities of, in terms of public buildings and what they need to do in terms of provisions for trans people, that also need to be considered outside of the Equality Act. So yeah, I don't know, Mark, if you have anything to add.
Just to say, I think, you know, as trade unionists, we've got other laws that work in our favor as well. So I think the way in which we can think about health and safety legislation, for example, ensuring that we have safe and healthy workplaces, that's one area that trade unions are really good at mobilizing to support various people. We can also think about GDPR. You know, the universities have responsibility to protect the private data of their employees. There are also things around sexual harassment laws. There's a range of different other kinds of laws. Yeah, and Saoirse's made a good point in the chat. I can just see that popping up, that health and safety law around stress and anxiety is also really a key area. So, you know, I think what we want to be thinking about is not just focusing all our energies on the Equality Act, as important as it is and has been, but also think about how that intersects with other kind of legal frameworks as well, and using all of those when we can, you know, to our advantage.
Yeah, like the Public Sector Equality Duty Act, which is also a key piece of legislation in terms of protecting minorities outside of the Equality Act, right? So that's another aspect that needs to be considered when we're talking about protecting minorities. It's not just the Equality Act.
Yeah, there's a point which I think is a fair point from Dan Green, who says the HRC is not fit for purpose. They go on to talk about the HRC and the Labour government, and saying, I don't think we should boycott the consultation, but we have to be aware that there's no amount of submissions that are likely to shift their position. So we need to be preparing now for that, not hoping the consultation yields a positive response. I agree with you. I do, and that will be part of what we're doing. I guess what I would say is, I do think using the consultation as a period of campaign, as a period of awareness building, and as a period of trying to kind of bring more people into this debate and involve them, I think is a good and positive outcome for us engaging with the consultation. But you know, I think your point is a good and relevant one. Someone else has said, and I have an answer for this, which I'm kind of happy to lead with, but I am interested if Gina or Mark want to say anything as well. An anonymous attendee, how can we be proactive against right-wing campus groups like, they insert a group, who will be surely emboldened by the Supreme Court ruling justifying their hate speech with freedom of speech? So does anyone else want to take that first? I have a pre-prepared answer to that kind of question, but go on, Gina.
I mean, we've had these discussions at Edinburgh University, and there's now a particular group that is meant to look into the issue of academic freedom and freedom of speech. I mean, this is actually something that's been appropriated, right, by the right wing. But I mean, it's important to really study this area, because academic freedom is not freedom of speech. These are two different areas. And if we're talking, for example, of university spaces, just spreading opinions and prejudices unfounded actually goes against academic freedom, as well as the harms that it brings to staff and students. So that it is important to kind of distinguish between these and take the fight back when we're talking about freedom of speech and about academic freedom, and making that division very clear, especially given we are talking about universities. I don't know, Joe, if that fits into what you were going to say.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, did you want to add anything before I say anything? No. I mean, for me, I think, you know, the point Gina has made is a very good one in terms of the conflation and the kind of collapsing of those two things into each other. But I think this is also why using this sort of period now as a period of campaign and community building. So, you know, bringing as many people as possible into this discussion, making it clear that actually this is about discriminating against people and you know, inhibiting their ability to participate in campus life. This isn't about your ability to say what you think, because actually that's happening all the time. So I think we need to kind of really pare things down and bring them back to basics. What does this rule, what could this ruling mean if the current direction of travel continues? It will mean this. That has no impact on your ability to say that. They are completely unconnected things. But what it does have the ability on is individual A to come in and have a fulfilling and dignified existence on campus. That's the consequence of this, not your ability in an imagined universe to say X, Y, and Z. And that is kind of why I think like we are going to have to kind of, you know, get involved and needle our way into these conversations, because I just don't think most kind of rational people, when confronted with that, would go, actually, yeah, I'm comfortable with that. No, I'm not comfortable with that. That is not, and especially as trade unionists, you know, who are supposedly invested in people being able to have equality. There's 2 points which I'm just going to ask people to contribute on before we wrap up, but very happy to continue, and I think we will have to continue doing more of these as we go through all these different stages, not just kind of check in where everybody is, but actually where we might need to pivot to as a union. There is one saying, is it worth using health and safety in relation to stress and anxiety? And one is just coming now saying, do we know Mary, this might be one for you. Do we know the format of the EHRC consultation? Our branch has participated in other consultations the last couple of years, such as flexible working. And I remember it was just a series of questions, ? The questions can also affect the answers of the consultation we'll get. So I don't know who wants to answer them. Mary, go on, Mary, we'll bring you in first.
Well, I was going to say, I'm not entirely sure. I'm anticipating it will be just as that's been outlined there. So there'll be a series of questions, and then I think there should be, if it's a good consultation, opportunity for us to kind of put in, you know, and anything else that you want to say or anything else that you want to contribute. I think it will be important to kind of like stay true to that in terms of what they're asking, because if we start answering questions that aren't there, they're going to like dismiss that before they start reading it, if that makes sense. So we will help with that as it comes through. But as I say, if it's a well-designed, good consultation, and I know that they've been like rushing that behind the scenes as well, but it should have that opportunity for us to feed in what we need to feed in. But yeah, we can help with advice around like keeping those answers succinct and on like having actions that we think that should be taking place, so that it's not too vague, you know, those kind of things that we'll support with, and kind of having, I mean, I think our UCU branches are good at making persuasive arguments, so we're not too worried about that. But you know, we'll just kind of do what we can to just give some sort of tips, I guess, and advice in terms of responding to that. So yeah, there'll definitely be more coming. I think probably next week, actually, in terms of the detail, I guess, of what that consultation looks like.
Gina, Mark, did you want to add anything?
I'll come in briefly if that, and then Gina, you can, hand it over to you. Yeah. So I mean, I think just two things. One of the good things about us as a union is that we represent lots of amazing people with lots of expertise. So I think the more we can kind of, as branches, use that in the context of our developing our branch consultations and the national ones, I think the stronger they're going to be as well. Because as we know in the Supreme Court judgment and certainly the HRC interim update, they didn't really consult anybody who knows anything about the issues that they were deciding, and that's one of the reasons we've ended up with this situation. But just going back to that point about stress and anxiety and health and safety law, it's really one of our most powerful tools as trade unionists, and I think we could be doing much more to make use of that. So I think it's some area of work that would be really good for the LGBT plus committee to pick up after Congress, to think about how we can much more concretely build some recommendations about how people can use that in the context of equality, people who are protected under the Equality Act more generally, but specifically in this context around trans and non-binary folk.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like the chair of the Staff Pride Network at Edinburgh University, in these discussions we've had with HR, said that one of the things that HR could do immediately is start in establishing channels of communication and recording, whether it's situations or distress of the LGBT community, specifically the trans, non-binary, intersex community, the impact of this on campus over the next year, so that they have some kind of record of the impact. So it's really pushing for HR universities to establish these new ways of recording the impact of what's going to happen, so that they have material data on this.
Can I just comment on that very briefly? Yeah, I mean, I think one thing we don't use enough of is things like near miss reporting. So, you know, people often think of that stuff in health and safety around tripping over a wire or something, but actually we should be using that in situations where people are being put in unreasonable stress in the workplace. So look, maybe that's something for branches to do, is to look at how those mechanisms work in your place, and we can think about national guidance and how that can feed into those local processes.
Excellent answers and advice. So I'm going to wrap us up just so that people can get on with the things that they've probably got coming next, and that our conference goers can get back to that as well. Thank you, Mark, for just jumping on. Thank you, Gina, for joining us. Thank you, Mary, and the staff that helped put this on. Thank you for coming along. This is the beginning of us probably meeting like this for quite some time now, rather than the end. But as I say, our union's position is crystal clear. This ruling does not remove or diminish any protections. Our policy on this is very, very clear, and we will be fighting tooth and nail over the next few weeks, months, and for as long as it takes to make sure that our trans and non-binary and intersex members continue to enjoy the legal protections that they currently do, and that we end up in a much better place than we currently are now in the UK in terms of people's dignity and rights and everything else. So thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend. It's due to be great weather. Do what you can to recharge and have a nice time. And yeah, thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.